Good afternoon. My name is Erin Payton, and I'm the Executive Director of the 19th Century Charitable Association, which is located in Oak Park, Illinois. Our mission is strengthening our community through learning, giving, and the sharing of our landmark building. And we're so happy to have you with us today for this virtual program. A couple things before we get started. One is if something that our presenter says strikes your fancy, either as a curiosity with a question or a comment, you can go ahead and leave that in our Q&A or our chat. And if there's time at the end of the program, we will unmute you and you can ask the question yourself. So I'm going to bring Pam Doman. She is on the Arts Committee for Programs. Hi, Pam.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to introduce Greg Borzel. He is an award-winning journalist who has worked for Traffic World Weekly, the American Medical News, the Field Museum, and the University of Chicago. Born in Chicago, Borzel has written several books about the Windy City, including Chicago Elf, Chicago's Cable Cars, Where to Bike Chicago, and Lost Restaurants of Chicago. Borzel earned a bachelor's degree at Grinnell College and a master's degree from the Medill School of Journalism at Northwestern University. He gives talks and tours about fountains, biking, the L, and the World's Columbia Exposition for the Chicago History Museum, Chicago Cycling Club, Forgotten Chicago, Biketropolis, and other organizations. So please welcome Greg Borzel.
So thank you so much for the introduction, and I'm delighted to be here. I presented in the past to your group and have great memories of you and your beautiful building in Oak Park. I'm very happy to be here for another reason, because I was really feeling a little bit sick, coming down with something, and almost didn't make it today. I went to see the doctor, and so don't worry, it's not COVID. The doctor right away, he said, "Young man, you have fountain fever." So he allowed me to come and present, and I hope by the end of this program, you will all have fountain fever as well. So here we go, onward with fountain fever. I thought long and hard about how to begin, and I thought, well, let's have a quote, a thoughtful quote from a 19th century philosopher. And this Charles Henderson stressed the pivotal moral impact of everyday good. So let's grab a quote from some of his writing to get us started today. This quote from Charles Henderson: "Our works and our surroundings either corrupt or refine our souls." And I would maintain, as I said a minute ago, that these beautiful fountains really do a lot to refine our souls, to make us more reflective, to soften the edges of the big city of Chicago, and really promote relaxation, understanding amongst each other, etc. And I said all of those were 19th century fountains, except for this last one that I just threw in for fun. So write what you know. That's the advice you get in a lot of writing classes. And I think it's good advice, you know, if you're an Olympian, write about the Olympics. If you're a firefighter, write about that work. But I actually prefer a corollary. I like to write about what I want to know. And for me, then it becomes a way to learn about a new subject. And I've always loved fountains. They just seem to inspire me. I've always been curious how they come to be, what they represent, how they move us. So as I traveled around the country and even in some European cities, I always paid attention to fountains. And here you've got Bethesda in the Central Park in New York City. And on the other side of the country, Lotus Fountain in San Francisco that some of you may also be familiar with. So I got to love fountains more and more, and I decided to write a book about the fountains of the United States. So I crisscrossed the country. And what I like to do now is take you with me on a tour across the US, kind of retrace some of the steps that I took. So let's take a little tour, and we'll go through it very quickly. And then afterwards, we'll revisit those same images so you can learn more about them. So we'll start here. And just enjoy these images, how different they all are, what they make you think and feel. How they inspire us, how they move you. I'm sure some of those were very familiar to you, but I have to confess here, I just pulled a little trick on you. Every other fountain I showed you was actually in Chicago. Amazing, isn't it? So let's revisit these fountains. This is Prometheus at Rockefeller Center in New York City. This is the Fourth Presbyterian Church right on Michigan Avenue. And this looks like a courtyard in some medieval French monastery. You know, so in case you don't really believe me that this is right on Michigan Avenue across from all the hustle and bustle of that busy street, look at the top of this fountain. And here you see it photographed from a different angle with the Hancock building behind it. This fountain designed by Howard Van Doren Shaw, and it's in that little cloistered area of the Fourth Presbyterian Church. Vegas, Bellagio Fountain. Back to Chicago. This is in Printers Row Park in the South Loop of Chicago. A beautiful fountain, often known because it is the centerpiece of Printers Row Lit Fair, held down there every year. Back on the road, obviously, the White House. This is when Barack Obama was in office, and he took to the White House the practice of tinting the water green for St. Patrick's Day. They've done it ever since he initiated that. Back to Chicago. This is the Board of Trade fountain, a very Art Deco fountain, beautifully placed in the little plaza next to the building on Jackson. And in the summertime, full of people. Tables are set up, and it's a very beautiful space thanks to this elegant Art Deco aluminum fountain with all kinds of artistic motifs that reflect off of the Board of Trade building itself. Back on the road, the St. Louis Union Station. Back in Chicago, Legion Park, which is adjacent to Peterson Park. It's right at the intersection of Peterson and Lincoln. And people drive by there 40 miles an hour and never realize that there is this beautiful fountain bubbling away just a few feet from the intersection of those two big streets. Back on the road, this is in Savannah, the Forsyth Fountain. Back in Chicago, Crane Girl. This is one of 4 small fountains that are spread out around Buckingham Fountain. Everyone's familiar with Buckingham, but they failed to notice these beautiful, gentle fountains surrounding Buckingham, about, I don't know, 50 yards away from the fountain itself, from Buckingham Fountain. Excuse me. And they're small and peaceful and very, very, very restful. Gentle. There's Crane Girl, Dove Boy, and other children with animals. This is the Pineapple Fountain in Charleston. Pineapple, of course, being the symbol of welcome, hospitality the South is known for. Back in Chicago, this is Nature's Friends. And it is in the Lincoln Park neighborhood, and it features 2 kids holding platters of water where the water bubbles bubbles off those platters. Beautiful little spot. Back on the road, this is the Firefighters Memorial in St. Louis. Back in Chicago, McCormick Place. This is out across, looking across the bike and walking lakefront path. It's a very large fountain, very, very vigorous. If you walk by, you're likely to get a little wet. Back on the road, the fountain at the very sad site of the 9/11 disaster. And this is a double fountain pouring down into the base of the World Trade Tower, one of them. And it's an enormous fountain. You can see I don't know if you can see my arrow on your screens, but those are people. So imagine the size of these two loud roaring fountains going down into the ground. Back to Chicago, this is at the Aeon Center, right on Randolph Street. People walk along this sidewalk and don't even take a minute to glance at this beautiful area, which is actually covered with 6 different fountains throughout the Aeon Center. I call it Fountain Heaven in Chicago. So guess where this US book led me? I kept coming back to Chicago and discovered more and more fountains in Chicago that I decided to do a book about Chicago fountains. And I discovered that we have more than 135 outdoor public fountains in the city of Chicago. Publicly accessible, no line, no wait, no entrance fee, like you might have going to a museum. It's been a bad year for fountains with COVID, but I hope they're all turned on again and visited next year. So I'm on a mission here to give everyone, well, like I said, fountain fever, to get everyone excited about our beautiful fountains. It's wonderful that Chicago is known for these things: museums, skyscrapers, architecture, performing arts. But I think it's high time to shine a light on our fountains. So let's look at each of these 4 areas and compare them to the fountain scene. Chicago is known for world-class museums, MSI, History Museum, Field Museum, etc. But what about its outdoor fountain museum? And I'm serious about that. Many of these outdoor fountains are museum quality work. For example, this is the Fountain of Time by Laredo Taft. Many of his pieces are in museums. This is a precious piece of art. It's outdoors for us to admire, to visit. This is of course in Hyde Park in Chicago. And a little close-up of Laredo Taft's Fountain of Time. Here's another example of a museum quality piece of work that's a fountain, outdoor fountain. This is San Marco 2, done by Ludovico Di Luigi, an Italian artist, very accomplished. He works in Italy, and he cast this horse in Venice, and then it was ceremoniously floated down the canals of Venice before shipped over to Chicago for this beautiful fountain. Chicago is known for its skyscrapers, of course, Vista, Sears, Hancock, etc. What about its sky sprayers? Yes, for example, the Centennial Fountain that sprays 2,000 gallons of water a minute, 200 feet across the river, and the arc is 8 stories high. A sky sprayer, if there ever was one. And of course, Buckingham is another sky sprayer. The water from the center jet goes 150 feet in the air. Now, I love Buckingham Fountain, but this is the only image you'll see of that fountain in this program because it's so well known already. I want to get you into excited about the other fountains of Chicago. Chicago is known for its stunning architecture. You know, the Trib Tower, the Rookery, Roby House, you name it. And that's great. But what about its architecturally inspired fountains, of which there are many, many, many. Here's an example, the Naguchi Fountain, right to the east of the Art Institute on Columbus Drive. It's very monumental. It features these two 40-foot long pieces of rainbow granite. Now the granite's millions of years old. The glass and steel behind the fountain are just dozens of years old, but the water is billions of years old, water having been created in the Big Bang and recirculated, recycled ever since. What a great combination of elements. What a strong, I think, monumental, architecturally inspired fountain. Here's another example, the Mist Fountain. This is in the West Loop. It features these 5 arches, and it's an interactive fountain. Kids have to push a button to make the spray of water come down. So they just love it. And the neighborhood loves it so much they use it as a kind of a signature for their neighborhood, which, as you know, is going gangbusters lately. The West Loop, very hot area. Beautiful fountain, architecturally inspired. Beautiful in the winter as well as the summer, because we have so many fountains that are just like a bowl of rusty looking pipes in the wintertime. This is beautiful, attractive even in the winter. One last architecturally inspired fountain would be the Peristyle, now called a Millennium Monument and Fountain. Features these columns, etc., and the nozzle shooting water 40 feet up in the air. Very strong, vigorous fountain. It is a replica of a peristyle that was located there a ways back, put in 1917 by Edward Bennett as part of the 1909 Chicago plan. So Bennett put this in, and it didn't last. Unfortunately, it was made of concrete, so it crumbled, and very, very sad to see it demolished in 1953, and a lot of that concrete was used as landfill for Lakeshore Drive. So with Millennium Park, they decided to recreate the peristyle in exactly the same spot and exactly the same design. It's almost identical, and what a beautiful job they did with this fountain. Finally, Chicago is known for its vibrant performing arts. Joffrey Ballet, the symphony, the theater, etc., etc. But what about its dynamic performing fountains? Yes, they're active, they're performing, they're putting on a show for us. For example, the spinning fountain in Hyde Park, spraying water every which way. And these fountains seem to be dancing for us. And here you see the water tower fountain. It almost looks like a stage setting with the lighting and the seating. A performance. And here you see the fountain in the base of Exelon Plaza, performing for you, combining metal and stone and water. And every shoot, every jet of this fountain varies constantly, and it makes for a different experience when you go by, no matter when. Here's another performing fountain. This is off of the Fountain of the Great Lakes, and what fun is a little boy, cherub, holding a fish, putting on a show. So kind of as an aside, but following up on the idea of performance, I want to show you a little video clip of a fountain in Chicago that was used in a performance. In this case, it was used for a commercial, a beer commercial. This is a very beautiful, and it is a magnet to everyone in the neighborhood. People gather here constantly for festivals, readings, performances, etc. So it's really a great gathering place. It shows how powerful a fountain can be to bring people together. Well, it happens to be the fountain that was used in a beer commercial. This is from Portland, Oregon. The Weinhard Beer Company wanted to pour beer through a public fountain. And Portland, isn't their motto keep, stay weird? But they said no, but Chicago said yes. And I'm going to play this now for you. And I want you to watch for our Lincoln Square fountain in this commercial and enjoy the performance.
In 1856, Henry Weinhard wanted to make good beer easy for everyone. So he crafted some really good beer and tried to pump it through a public fountain in Portland. We think that's awesome. So we gave it a shot ourselves.
There it is. There it is.
This is Henry Weinhard's. Good beer made easy.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. So here's what we're going to do with the rest of our time. We're going to have to move quickly. I want to leave time for your questions. We're going to look at some 19th century fountains, some pretty remarkable, kind of off the chart fountains in Chicago, and then end with one story, particularly interesting story about a Chicago fountain. So here are a few 19th century fountains. This is the Drexel Fountain on the south side. It is our oldest remaining fountain. There are other fountains built before this, but this is the oldest one still standing. And it is quite 19th century in its design. It's very dainty. It's decorated with mythological images, and it's honoring a banker, Mr. Francis Drexel. And it's ironic because it's thought that Drexel never set foot in Chicago. He was the head of a bank in Philadelphia that was doing very well. So he sent his sons to Chicago to run the hinterland. Let's see, what is this? Fountains. And so the sons were so appreciative that they paid for this fountain to honor their father. Here's another, and it's one of many that have a link to the World's Fair of 1893, the World's Columbian Exposition. This fountain in Little Italy features a statue of Christopher Columbus that was the centerpiece of the Italian pavilion at the World's Fair. And the Italians took this so seriously that they wanted to make this statue really special. So they melted down crucifixes, candelabra, chalices, even some gold ones, and put it into this statue. The Pope blessed it before it was sent off to Chicago for the World's Fair. This very statue that you're looking at. After the fair, the statue was moved to the Columbus building in downtown Chicago. Columbus stood over the entranceway, and that building lasted till 1959, it was torn down. The statue was rescued, but not treated very well. Here is an example of it being in disrepair. Here it's on a float, probably on Columbus Day, being escorted by Knights of Columbus. But the statue went missing for a while, and it turned up in the junkyard of a lumber yard after a while. Very shameful for such a beautiful piece and such an historic piece. Well, in 1966, they got their act together, the Italian American community of Chicago, and rescued the statue, restored it, and put it on a pedestal here with this fountain. Beautiful, beautiful setting. Unfortunately, you all may know some of the next part of this story. It was taken down because of political issues related to Columbus and his role in the New World. I don't want to take a stand on those issues, but here you see a protest by the Italian American community in Little Italy on Columbus Day after that statue had been removed and the fountain disconnected. There was another Columbus Fountain in Chicago. Here you see it downtown. This is Columbus here. A close-up of him. And the fountain was right next to the county building on LaSalle Street. And it was a really remarkable fountain for its time. It was put up in 1892 for the opening of the World's Fair, because the fair opened in 1892 officially. And the idea was to give water to all the visitors who came to Chicago for the fair. It was called the Drake Fountain because Drake paid for it. And it was also known as the Ice Water Fountain because it had a chamber underneath that was packed with ice every morning. And then the water would run through coils through the ice and come out ice cold for people drinking there. Pretty remarkable. Well, again, here's a close-up of Columbus on that fountain. In 1909, it was moved way down to the south side, 92nd and Exchange. And there it stood in the middle of a traffic island for years. Here you see the Columbus Fountain, not functioning, but attractive, historic, and tied to the World's Fair. Pretty amazing. Well, you can guess what happened there too. Here is the pedestal that you see in this photo, and Columbus has been removed from this fountain also. Here's another fountain created to give drinking water to visitors to the World's Fair of 1893. This is the Rosenberg Fountain on Michigan Avenue, right at 11th Street. And it was positioned not downtown, but more practically right by the train station, the Illinois Central Depot at 11th and Michigan. So people arriving, coming and going to Chicago, and then you could also take the IC to the fair throughout the months of the fair. They could have a drink of water at this fountain, put up and paid for by Julius Rosenwald. There's a close-up of the fountain. This fountain still stands. It's no longer a drinking fountain, but it stands there in all its beauty. Up top is Hebe, the Greek goddess of youth. So this is, in some ways, our fountain of youth. And it's quite historic. Charles Tyson Yerkes, I'm sure you've all heard of him in some of your previous programs. He was the transit titan of Chicago. He did a lot to promote rail cars, horse-drawn rail cars, cable cars, and the L. A great book about him called The Robber Baron, and he was also known as the Goliath of Graft. And so to improve his image with the public, he set up a beautiful electric fountain in Chicago. Unfortunately, it's one of the ones that is no longer standing, but I thought it'd be worth mentioning to you in passing. Here's a postcard of the electric fountain that Yerkes set up in Lincoln Park in 1890, called the Electric Fountain because it took a very innovative step to combine electric lights with water. Now, we're very familiar with that today, and Buckingham Fountain is a great example of how electric lights combined with water can make beautiful things happen. But in 1890, that was a risky, unheard of thing to do. Yerkes pulled it off. It took a donation of $23,000, which is worth $600,000 in today's dollars. And he set up this fountain. And here you see it operating in different mode. It shot water 110 feet up into the air when it put on a show at the end of every evening. Alas, Yerkes did not get his money's worth. In the end, this fountain did not improve his image at all. People figured that, it was somewhat self-motivated. The fountain was set up at the right along one of his cable car lines. So to go see this fountain, you had to pay a nickel on the cable car line. And so people, for that reason and many other reasons, distrusted Yerkes and eventually drove him out of town. But that's another story. Here's another 19th century fountain, 1887. This is called Storks at Play. It's in Lincoln Park, just south of the conservatory. Beautiful, playful fountain. And it's ironic that it's misnamed, because I was doing some research on this and wanted to dot all my I's, cross all my T's. So I brought in an ornithologist from the Field Museum to identify the birds that are here. And he said, no, they're not storks. they're not geese. They're not cranes. Actually, they're swans. So, they could rename this fountain. They never will. But it's a favorite spot in Lincoln Park for many, many people. Now, my scientists from the Field Museum could not identify these little fellas. The little boys have fins. They're holding a fish, but they also have fins instead of legs. So those are merboys. I didn't even know there was such a thing as a merboy. But there you have it. We have mermaids and merboys. Kids love to play in this fountain. They're really not supposed to, but they often splash around in there with the merboys. 1990 fountain. It's in Wicker Park. It's called the Gurgoyle Fountain. And when I first read that, I thought that it was a typo. In fact, the artist is just messing with us. It's a fountain that has gargoyles, as you see here, and the gargoyles gurgle. So it's the Gurgoyle Fountain. Another fountain with a link to the World's Fair is Fountain Girl. This innocent young girl was part of the exhibit of the Women's Christian Temperance Union at the World's Fair. And the point was to encourage people to drink water instead of whiskey or gin. And so there you have that stream of water coming out of the basin. After the World's Fair, Fountain Girl was moved downtown Chicago. And here you see her standing on a sidewalk downtown Chicago. And here you see the entire setup that was used at the World's Fair. You've got this base with a trough for horses to drink and steps, big massive piece of rock that's holding her up, elevating her. Well, you might wonder, how did people drink out of this fountain? Did you stick your head under the stream of water and try to catch some water in your mouth? No. Look at this picture and you'll see that there are drinking cups attached with a chain to her wrist. Look how dirty those cups are. And it's not that dirt that'll kill you, it's the germs that are in the cup. And so this was a great idea, but really very dangerous. And unfortunately, very, very common throughout Chicago, perhaps throughout the country. Most drinking fountains at the time used cups that were attached to the fountain. And then those cups were shared. This is another example of that shared cup setup. These were installed by the Illinois Humane Society, and there were over 60 of these fountains around the city. It was not until 1911 that Illinois banned these shared cups. By then they were known in the press as death cups, and that's what it took to get rid of them and replace them with the bubblers that we know today. By the way, if this design of a little fountain looks familiar to you, that's because there are still 2 of these more than 60 Illinois Humane Society fountains left in Chicago. And they are on this quiet street corner of Michigan Avenue and Chicago. 2 of them right next to the water tower, and 50 million tourists a year, well, pre-COVID, used to come by, and no one would even notice these small historic fountains. So please, next time you go by, please take a drink out of one of these fountains. Now, don't be put off by the dog trough at the bottom and the horse trough up above. This water has a bubbler where you drink beautifully clear, clean water through the bubbler. The ones who really appreciate these 2 fountains the most are horses. They swing by through the area as they're giving these carriage rides, and they'll run up to these fountains knowing that they're going to get a good drink of water here. Again, here's the bubbler up here. Please stop and take a sip or take a selfie or whatever. So much for the 19th century. Let's talk about just a few fountains that just jump off the page, for me at least. Here's one called Peaches. I find this remarkable because it's named after just an average person. All these other fountains are, named after a banker or a general or a politician, so many of them. And this is named after Peaches, who worked at Gethsemane Garden Center right across the street from where this fountain was built in her honor. This was put up by Mary Ann Smith, the alderman at the time. And this was 1998 when this fountain was built for Peaches, and there's a little plaque in front talking about her life, what a great employee she was of Gethsemane. Another remarkable fountain is Sky Space. Built by James Turrell, a world-renowned artist. It went up in 2006 on the UIC campus. And it features this structure that I used to think was like a water tower or something, but no, it's a very, very beautiful piece of art. You can see here, and as a close-up, water sprays down along the walls of this structure, and you enter through a door, open door, and you go inside. And the point of a Sky Space is that you look up an opening in the roof of the Sky Space, and you see the heavens, day or night, without telephone poles or buildings or any other distractions. And so the artist called this an observatory without a telescope. Good way to put it, I think. Beautiful setting. And I just want to point this out. Maybe you'll be able to visit it someday. It's the only Sky Space that Turrell ever made that's out in the public. All the rest are in schools, churches, or the homes of very wealthy people. So this is quite an artistic treasure. And here's another view of it looking north. There is a companion fountain next to it. And you can see that the ceiling of the Sky Space changes colors regularly. All right, one more remarkable fountain, perhaps a little off color. I apologize for that, but listen, we got to cover the waterfront, so to speak. How about the shit fountain? Yes, there is such a thing. It says it right here on the pedestal. It features this bronze coil with water flowing over it constantly to keep it kind of fresh and glistening. It went in 2005. It's in front of the home and art studio of Jerzy Knar. And he's a Polish-American artist, and he's famous for liturgical art. He makes crucifixes, pulpits, chairs for churches, baptismal founts, statues for Catholic schools of school kids. Here is the doors to St. Benedict the African, a Catholic church, and he designed these doors, and these little figures going around are working their way to heaven. That's really, really remarkable, touching. And his studio is a beautiful place also. Artwork decorates the exterior, and on the corner of his home and studio is an angel carved in wood. She's only behind bars, so it won't be stolen. And on the roof of his studio home is a ladder to heaven. Well, what would motivate such a religious artist to make this? Well, it's because his neighbors were not picking up their poop, their dog's poop, as they would walk through the area. And so he wanted to say, in your face, people. And so I guess, you know, he has a peculiar sense of humor, but this fountain has become quite iconic kind of gathering place, especially for young people. Knar calls it a pile of crap. I call it his number 2 fountain. And there's a reason for that, because it's actually the second fountain he made. His first fountain is the Black History Fountain, which we want to look at because this is Black History Month. And this fountain is on the south side of Chicago over by St. Sabina's Church. It features 12 large stone balls with the names of great African-American leaders on them. And, you know, Muhammad Ali, Harold Washington, et cetera. And the idea is that the water that runs off of these large stone balls will pass through the little grooves across to a plinth, a pedestal at the other end. And on that plinth is running water. And so the idea is that the water of these leaders, inspiring figures, will mix with the community and inspire them to do well. Quite beautiful, helped to rejuvenate this area of the South Side, Jerzy Knar. All right, we're just going to finish up now with a story about a particular fountain that's quite pathetic or amusing, depending on your perspective. This is the Children's Fountain, originally built in Heald Square, 1982. It was the idea of Jane Byrne to put this fountain up and to dedicate it to children. It looks old, but it's really new. It's actually a catalog fountain. Jane Byrne said, oh, I want this on the top, put this in the middle, put some cherubs here, put some cranes here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And she just kind of built it from a catalog. But she loved it. Here's another image of that fountain in color. Again, Wrigley Building, Tribune Tower in the background. And you see that fountain again from this angle on the cover of Jane Byrne's book, My Chicago, her memoir of her experiences as mayor. That's how much she loved this fountain. In fact, in the book, she says, it's my favorite project. One of the 2 achievements that mean the most to me. Wow, this fountain dedicated to children. Well, saying that was akin to putting a target on it, because when Daley became mayor, he ripped this fountain out. Now, he had an excuse. They were redoing Wacker Drive, but that was finished quickly and ahead of schedule. But Jane's fountain went missing Oh, we can't find it. Oh, gee whiz. Sorry about that. Well, it was buried in the bowels of some Park District storage area. It took 5 years for it to be discovered. There was a big brouhaha from the press, from Burns' family, and people said, "Come on, this is no reason to discard this fountain." So finally, it was rediscovered, but then the problem became, where to put it? We have to find some neutral ground where the local alderman will not be insulting Mayor Daley by having Burns Fountain reestablished in that neighborhood. So it ended up by the History Museum, North and Clark. Here you see that very same fountain. And it's a beautiful addition to that corner. And it does teach us a lot of lessons about history. One of them is that politics is not children's play, like the saying goes. It's not child's play. Here is the plaque on the fountain, and it says, "Dedicated to all children in Chicago who will take from our past to better our future." Well, that's not exactly the message that Daley sent, but hopefully that's a message that's conveyed today from the Children's Fountain. So on that note, children enjoying the fountain, I leave you with this couple images of the Crown Fountain, one of the country's most interactive, playful, delightful fountains. And I will urge you all to go forth and have fun with Fountain Fever. Thank you. Or I just want to put this one last slide up.
Please do that first.
The book retails for $30. I'd be happy to send you a copy plus a free map. For $15, just send me an email with your address and we'll take it from there. You can pay me with a check or Zelle or whatever down the road.
Well, that was really interesting, especially that last story. I mean, I hate to say I continually am surprised by politics, but I'm continually surprised by politics and how petty things can get. It's like finding problems when there shouldn't even be problems.
Petty and personal.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we already have questions and they're good ones. So I am going to Rose Meyer. Hi.
Hi. Before the COVID came, I was asked to come to a meeting of people that lived in Lawndale way back when Lawndale was. And the idea was to have a project that they were going to do. Have you ever been on Independence Boulevard and go to about 1500 South? And there is a huge fountain, almost as large. Well, when we were young, we used to hang around that. We would meet our boyfriends there. We would play in the water. And it went into a lot of disuse. And this committee is having a project done to rename it, because that's a fountain that Martin Luther King's apartment lived. It lived looking over that apartment the time he came to Chicago, when he came here about the protests about the housing. And that was what he would look at night, was this big fountain.
Wow.
And
would that have been?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I said there's a committee working on that to raise funds. They did get an initial start fund. I don't know where it is now because we became in COVID.
Thanks,
so,
Rose.
Rose, would that be the Independence Square Fountain? It features some kids on top of a pedestal playing, celebrating the 4th of July kind of a theme.
Right. That's where it was, in that round circle where you had to drive around it every time you came down Independence.
Yeah.
So
almost
we're
like
gonna rebuild it again.
I'm glad to hear that people are working on that. just a note about that fountain, when it opened, water shot out of the things that the kids were holding. And the water was colored red, white, and blue for the patriotic
Aw.
independence theme. But if you think about it, what we're holding were Roman candles and fireworks. So today that wouldn't be too PC.
So you've heard of it. So hopefully they get the funding after COVID and they can get it back to its glory. I'm sure there are a lot of fountains that if they just had dedicated committees, they would be able to get brought back, but it has to have someone to care about it. Okay. Ellen Liebner has a good question. Ellen, can you unmute yourself?
Okay, great. Hi, Greg, thank you so much. I loved your presentation. I learned so much, and I love the Henderson quote at the beginning. My question is, in your opinion, what is a great fountain in Chicago to sit by? For example, I think I remember sitting by the Wicker Park one. I think they had lots of seats around it. And I just love sitting by a fountain.
Yeah, you and me both. I would encourage you to, the Wicker Park Fountain is wonderful for that. The so-called Gurgoyle Fountain. Fountain of the Great Lakes, which is hidden away on Michigan Avenue, just south of the main entrance of the Art Institute. A lot of people don't even know it's there.
I know one, yeah.
It's a beautiful place to sit, a lot of trees, as well as the fountain. I would also urge you to go to Aeon Center, a little more modern style of fountain, but it has a sunken plaza. So you really you're kind of hugged by the fountains and the building and the trees, the gazebos, and the noise of the city kind of fades away. It's a great place to sit, read. There are some restaurants surrounding the sunken plaza, so you can grab a cup of tea or a bite to eat. But that's a great question.
And
There's
that's north of Millennium Park, right?
Correct, right on Randolph, east of Michigan, at the base of the Aeon building.
Awesome. Gail Headland, do you have a question?
This is actually, it's her husband, Kurt.
Gail.
Yeah.
He asked the question.
I asked the question. So do you know why the fountain outside of Navy Pier was replaced?
Yes, it was replaced because this would be the fountain just to the west of Navy Pier as you're kind of entering the building. There's a playful children's play area and a fountain. And there was a very nice fountain there put up by a Vegas company that made it very interactive and playful. It did not need to be taken out. It was taken out and replaced by another fountain because the Polk Brothers Foundation came along and said, we want naming rights to this park. And we want to, we'll give you millions, but we're going to remake the park and it's going to be named after us. And so that's now the Polk Brothers Park Fountain. We lost a beautiful fountain, but they replaced it in exactly the same spot with the same plumbing with another playful interactive fountain. It's too bad they couldn't have moved that one somewhere else, the previous one.
That does seem like an easier. Is it easy to move a fountain?
Not really.
Because they're really
Depends
heavy.
how big and heavy it is.
Yeah.
But that previous one had only been in for 25 years.
Oh.
It was working fine. Kids loved it. They just ripped it out. But the end was okay with the new fountain.
All right. Cora and or Bob Burton have a couple questions. So why don't you guys unmute yourself? I'm not sure who's going to ask it. I don't want to make any assumptions. Hi.
Hi, it's Cora.
Hi, Cora.
We read down at the Chicago Lighthouse for the Blind, and every time I go down there, I go down Damon and pass this lovely little fountain. And I wondered if you knew about it and if you knew a story about it. It's on the east side of Damon, between Harrison and Roosevelt, in the medical district there. And in the wintertime, they have a beautiful wooden case that they actually place own this fountain. So I always look near springtime to see when this is going to be uncovered. And
Yes.
a large pineapple on top.
That fountain is mentioned in the book. I really don't know much about it. It's a very small, modest fountain, so I do not have a story for it. But the Park District does cover up the fountains with these wooden little sheds every winter. It's interesting to note that many different entities run these fountains: Park District, Water Department, Streets and Sand, the city itself, and then a lot of private companies run these fountains. So I think that one is a Streets and Sand fountain.
Okay, well, thank you for the help.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are running out of time. Nan Brulette was wondering if it's too hard to show now, is there a way she could email you to ask to see that firefighter fountain in St. Louis again? I think that's the one she was mentioning.
Sure.
Does that ring a bell? Did you show that at the beginning of your program?
I did.
Is there a way she could maybe she just wants to see a picture again, but I don't think we have time to show it. Is there a website she can look up, or?
Yeah, if you email me,
Okay.
I'll email you an image of that.
Great.
Or 50 images of that fountain, whatever you like. I shot those. That was actually in Kansas City, Missouri, the Firefighters.
Okay. Great.
Fountain.
You hear
And I
that,
would mention. Go ahead.
No, Nan send an email. I sent the email out there, and if not, just contact me, okay? All right. So the other thing is, you mentioned it briefly, and I think we are not going to have time to have an in-depth conversation on this, but Georgia Parcha mentioned, you had mentioned the people fighting either for or against the Columbus fountains and statues and stuff. You know, and she used the double C, the big C's, cancel culture. And, you know, someone who is tracking this, and you track so much of history in Chicago and elsewhere and stuff, what would your suggestion be for how to have a civilized conversation about this, so that on both sides, and there's more than two sides on this, there's like 300 sides on this, so that, you know, a rational decision can actually be made in the best case for history, but also for the real history, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that is a huge issue, and I wish we could all gather together with kindness in our hearts and talk these things through. A lot of good points are being made, but perhaps some of them are going too far. The last I read is all of Lincoln's statues are being reevaluated in the land of Lincoln. So how to do it? We have to be respectful, as all of us are, but others are not. We have to be open-minded and listen to each other.
Yeah, and it's so hard for all of this to be being done when people aren't able to really get together too. You know, like as we all know, these Zoom meetings are wonderful because they're allowing us to continue on and have some sort of semblance of normalcy. But if you're not all in a room and like really feeling each other's emotions and stuff, sometimes it's harder to connect and really get that empathy going on both sides. So hopefully we can start having some in-person meetings, and I would love to think of it as a chance to move forward together. Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
So, I mean, do you ever participate in any of this because you are so knowledgeable?
Not officially, but I try and talk to people when I get a chance. Behind the scenes, side conversations. Yeah.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, everybody, I'm so sorry. We're not going to have, this is a good thing. This is a good problem, is that we are not going to have time to get to everyone's questions because his program was so good. And I hope you're seeing there's lots of chats telling you what a great program you had. And we really appreciate it. And the energy you gave for it, even, you know, as you maybe weren't going to be able to do it, you did it with gusto. So we really appreciate that. I am going to tell you something. If you want to continue to see great programs like this, you know, we have them every Monday afternoon and they're always different. You can go to our website at www.19thcentury.org and look at the calendar and register for some. They're just as easy as this one that you registered for. If you want to help us continue to put on great programs like this, consider a donation. And that can be done again right on our webpage, www.19thcentury.org. Greg, any last thoughts before we sign off for the day?
Apologies for giving you fountain fever, but I would ask you to visit Chicago Fountains the Chicago way early and often.
And definitely email him if you want to get a copy of his book. It sounds like he's giving out quite a discount. So the email on there, send him an email. And if you need it from me later, I'll give it to you, okay? Well, for everyone at the 19th, oh, go ahead.
The map is nice too. It'll help you go discover fountains all around the city. So,
and especially this summer when we're not fully indoors yet, what a great way to get outside and see some new neighborhoods. Everybody have a wonderful day. Enjoy this sunshine and maybe go for a walk and find a new fountain. Have a great day.